I haven't believed in monsters since I was a boy. That kind of thinking, ghost stories and cryptid tales, was a luxury for people who didn't work 12-hour days with busted knuckles and dust in their lungs. The beast of Bray Road? Just another piece of backwoods folklore, like the haunted mill or the glowing orbs people claimed to see in the woods. Folks needed something to explain away dead livestock and poor fencing. Made better gossip than admitting you left a gate open. The combine growled under me, steady and loud, eating row after row of wheat like it had a grudge. My hands were stiff on the wheel, and the floodlights ahead cut deep into the crop like a knife through soft bread. Past midnight now, moon hidden behind heavy clouds, my last chance to finish the north field before the storms rolled in. I adjusted my cap and took a long pull from the thermos beside me. Coffee tasted like burnt bark, but it kept me upright. The hum of the machine and the crunch of the wheat settling into the header calmed me. Out here, surrounded by the dark and the steady noise, I could breathe. The CB crackled. "You seeing any glowing eyes out there, Uncle Frank?" That was Jason, my nephew, back at the grain bins. Always had a smart mouth. "Yeah," I said, deadpan. "Saw the beast, driving a Prius and bitching about gas prices." He laughed, and the signal dropped. I let myself smirk just a little. Then it was quiet again. Just me and the machine and the endless gold around me. I kept my eyes forward, watching for rocks or sinkholes that might chew up the blades. No time for mechanical crap this late in the season. Too much to do, not enough daylight left in the seasons. Still, I thought about those stories. Dogmen in the trees, clawed footprints in the mud, shadowy shapes chasing cars. I knew better. I knew what wolves looked like. I knew what a man looked like. Anything in between was just fear talking. It must have been close to midnight when I saw it. The combine's lights swept ahead, washing over stalks of wheat, and then over something dark and out of place. I slowed the machine, squinting through the glass. At first I thought it was a sack of feed or some rubbish someone had dumped, but when I got closer, I saw the twisted body of a large dog right in the middle of my row. Had I hit it on the last pass? Poor thing looked like it had been mangled. Body twisted, ribs splayed, a leg ripped off, and more than a few dark stains in its fur. Sure, a combine could have done that, but I would have noticed something like that. And why was it in a row I hadn't done yet? Maybe it had been killed by coyotes, but that dog was easily twice the size of the largest coyote I'd ever seen. It didn't make any sense, but still, I had to deal with it somehow. I brought the combine to a full stop and climbed down, floodlights on, flashlight in one hand, and the pitchfork from the mount in the other, just in case it was coyotes after all. The air hit me thick, wet, still, and smelling faintly of something sweet and spoiled, like meat beginning to rot. I crouched beside the carcass. It was a pretty big dog, at least 100 pounds. Its eyes were still open. Its jaw hung slack. It was absolutely gruesome, and the bite on its neck was wide enough to make my gut twist. Then I heard something. It sounded like slow, gurgled breathing. Not mine, not the wind. Heavy and wet, like someone breathing through a busted nose. It was coming from the right, maybe 20 feet to my right. Steady, slow, deliberate. I turned slowly, pitchfork tight in my grip. Then I turned the flashlight toward the sound and froze. Something huge crouched in the wheat, not all the way hidden, not trying very hard, just squatting, watching. Its eyes caught the beam and flashed. The body was wrong. Too long, too bent, with fur in patches and bare, raw skin stretching over bone. It had a distinct hump between its shoulders, like its spine had warped outward, forcing the skin to stretch and bulge grotesquely beneath ragged patches of fur. The shape reminded me of a starving bear crossed with a man crawling through a nightmare. For a moment, it didn't move. It just watched me, breathing like every breath hurt. Then it tilted its head, and it growled. I took one step back, then another. The pitchfork felt light in my hands. The thing slowly rose out of the wheat. It stood taller than any man I'd ever seen. 7 feet easy, and even hunched like it was, its shoulders nearly blocked the floodlight. I could see its chest rise and fall, hear the low rattle in its throat. My mouth went dry. I didn't wait to see what it did next. I spun and ran, old boots slipping on loose dirt, flashlight bouncing wild shadows ahead of me. Behind me, I heard it give a noise, half growl, half scream, and then crashing through the wheat like a bulldozer. The combine was 30 yards away. It felt like a mile. I ran harder than I had in decades, lungs burning, legs numb. I could hear it behind me, fast, but not smooth, like every step hurt it, like its body was too broken to move the way it wanted. But it was gaining. I didn't look back, just the sound of it breathing, snarling, wheezing like it was both dying and ravenous. 10 yards, 5. My hand hit the rail, and I pulled myself up on the platform, just as something heavy struck the side. The combine rocked with the impact. I couldn't help myself. I risked a glance, and there it was, furiously clawing at the ladder. For a moment it fumbled, its twisted limbs not quite figuring out the rhythm. Then, with a sickening lurch, it began to pull itself up, jerky but determined. Up close it looked even worse, face like a melting mask, fur stuck to oozing skin, eyes full of something almost human and fully wrong. I grabbed the pitchfork and drove it downward. The tines struck something solid, flesh or bone, and the beast shrieked, a sound like steel ripping apart. It lost its grip and fell, crashing into the wheat below. I ripped the door open and got inside. Then I fumbled for the ignition, barely able to find the key with my shaking hands. Outside, the beast howled, high and sharp, a sound that didn't belong in this world. The machine groaned and surged ahead as I jammed the throttle forward. I saw it lurch alongside one last time, trying to keep pace, its ruined limbs flailing in the wheat. Then it veered away, disappearing back into the stalks. Gone. But I didn't stop. Not for a second. By the time I made it back to the barn, my hands were still shaking. I parked the combine, killed the lights, and sat there in the dark for a long minute, trying to breathe. The world was quiet again, wind rustling the trees, an owl somewhere out near the fence line. Ordinary sounds, safe sounds. I washed my hands 3 times in cold water, scrubbing at the dried blood on my knuckles even though I knew it wasn't mine. I didn't check the pitchfork, didn't want to see what came off the tines. I leaned it in the corner and left it there. I thought about calling someone. The sheriff, the DNR, hell, even the radio station that ran those paranormal call-in hours. But what would I say? That I was chased by a mutated dogman? That it knew how to climb ladders? No one would believe it. And truth be told, I wasn't sure I believed it either, so I said nothing. But the next morning when Jason came by for breakfast, laughing about something he and his buddies had done the night before, I cut him off cold. "Stop hanging around outside after dark," I told him. He blinked. "What? I mean it. You and your friends, stay out of the woods, especially north of the creek. Nothing good out there." He gave me a weird look, like he wanted to make a joke. Then he must have seen something in my face, because he just nodded and went quiet. That was good enough for me. They used to talk about the beast of Bray Road around here. Big, hairy, half-man, half-wolf thing that prowled the back roads and chased cars in the 80s. Folks laughed it off, but not all of them. Some swore it was real, said it was smart, said it watched you. I never gave it much thought, not until I saw that thing at the school. I'd worked maintenance at this high school in rural Wisconsin for 27 years, and when I retired, they kept me on part-time. Said nobody knew the pipes and the locks like I did. Maybe that was true. But the real reason I stayed was because something was off, and it had been for a while. It started with the dumpsters. Found one flipped clean onto its side behind the kitchen loading bay. No storm, no pranksters, just tipped like a toy. Trash scattered, meat gone missing from a sealed box left out too long. Thought it was a bear at first, maybe even a big stray dog. But the smell, it wasn't right. Pungent, oily, with this sweet rot like a freezer full of spoiled meat. Then came the prints, greasy, misshapen smudges across the vinyl floors near the basement entrance. Way too big for a raccoon, even too big for a bear, too soft-edged for shoes. Once I found a broken tile near the boiler room stairs, like something heavy had slipped and tried to catch itself, left behind a long scratch on the wall. I mentioned it to Carla, the kitchen lead. She just laughed and said I needed a new hobby, so I made it mine. Started staying late, later than anyone knew, made rounds after the sun went down, started carrying my big mag light again, same one I used back in the 90s when the power grid failed during that ice storm. I brought my old crowbar too, just in case. I wasn't scared, not yet, but I was curious, and I knew when something didn't belong. The worst part wasn't what I saw, it was what I smelled. Every time I stepped into the basement, it was there. That same animal funk stale blood scent, like something had been curled up in the dark, sweating and leaking into the concrete. Someone or something was hanging around the school after hours, and I was going to find out what. I started noticing a pattern. Every Thursday night, the cafeteria staff stocked up for Friday's hot lunch run. Sloppy joes, ground beef, frozen patties, that kind of thing. And every Friday morning for 3 weeks straight, something had been off. Meat missing. Floors smeared and covered in disgusting, undefinable stains. Doors left open that had been shut. Carla blamed it on the delivery guys, but I'd been here long enough to know when shit isn't right. One night, I dusted the inside of the delivery door latch with baby powder. Come morning, the smudge was gone, replaced by a thick, greasy smear. And the meat locker? A complete mess. And down 15 pounds of beef. Something was getting inside. Then I found the print. In the waxed hallway near the gym entrance. One partial foot. One something else. Human-shaped, sort of. Toes too long. Ball of the foot too wide. Deformed. It was faint, but the grit and oil left behind outlined the shape clear as day when the flashlight hit it right. I took a photo, but the flash washed it out. Figures. Not that anyone would have cared anyway. The more I looked, the more I found. A streak of black fur caught in a locker hinge, deep gouges in a mop handle, and always that horrible stink. The worst was the night I came in to reset a circuit in the boiler room and heard a noise coming from the old maintenance tunnel, a place nobody used anymore. I stood there, lights off, listening to something move just out of reach, shuffling, breathing, sniffing. I didn't go in that night, but I started leaving the boiler room unlocked. Next time, I'd be ready. Thursday night, I waited. I left the lights off. No flashlight, no tools clanging around. Just me, the crowbar, and a gut full of nerves. I wedged the side door open with a rubber stop, killed the alarms, and slipped into the dark like I belonged there. The boiler room was humid and quiet, metal ticking softly from old heat. I left the cafeteria meat order untouched in the walk-in cooler. It was bait now. Midnight came and went, and then I heard it. Just past the boiler room wall, down in the tunnel, that same low breathing, the wet kind that stuck in your ears and got under your skin. Something big shifting its weight, dragging itself closer, sniffing. I stepped softly across the concrete floor and opened the tunnel door. The smell hit like a punch. Sour meat, old blood, wet fur. My eyes watered. I moved in. The tunnel stretched maybe 50 feet. Narrow, no lights, just old wiring and mildew-stained pipes. Halfway down, I saw it. A shape, hunched over, back to me, pawing at a crate of something I couldn't see. I lifted my maglite and flicked it on. The thing froze. It was bigger than I thought. Hair in clumps, patches of sick-looking skin showing through. Back arched unnaturally. Head low. Its limbs were too long. One of them twitched when the light hit it. Then it slowly turned. Its eyes glowed for a split second in the light of the torch. Its face, God help me, looked like a dog skull stretched wrong over a human jaw, as if someone had tried to piece the two together with bare hands and no clue what belonged where. Eyes too deep, lips torn back, teeth yellow and jutting out at impossible angles. My stomach dropped. I felt cold all over. I've seen roadkill cleaner than that face. And then the mouth opened, slow and shuddering, into a silent snarl that felt personal, like it hated me for seeing it. I backed up slowly, flashlight in one hand, crowbar in the other. "That's close enough," I said. Dumb thing to say. Maybe I hoped it could understand. It didn't. It charged. It moved faster than I expected. Too fast for something that mangled. It howled, more like a scream than any animal noise I've heard, and barreled toward me with limbs swinging wrong, like its bones were broken, but still somehow functional. I swung the crowbar on instinct, caught it across the side of the head. It shrieked and reeled, but didn't fall. I turned and ran. The tunnel was barely wide enough. I clipped my shoulder against the wall, nearly dropped the flashlight. Behind me, it thrashed and scraped, those claws clicking on concrete as it gave chase. I burst through the heavy boiler room door and slammed it shut behind me. I grabbed the nearest thing, a busted desk chair, and jammed it under the knob. The door shook once, twice. A roar of frustration echoed through the metal. Then silence. I stood there panting, drenched in sweat, heart thudding so loud I could barely hear myself think. My legs threatened to give out. I didn't move until well after the first light broke through the boiler room window. When I finally left, I locked that tunnel door and welded a steel bar across it with the school's emergency repair kit. No one asked why. No one cared about what happened down there. And I didn't want to make a complete fool of myself. I hadn't worked another night shift since then. In fact, I didn't leave the house at all after dark. Not anymore. My name's Michael. I'm an ex-Army Ranger with 3 combat tours, discharged 2 years ago. I've been suffering from sleep apnea and panic attacks ever since I got back from Iraq. Running seems to be the only thing that helps. When I moved here, I discovered an old quarry out in the woods, about 2 miles from town. Quiet, isolated, and just busted up enough to keep people out. I loved the isolation, and it was just the right distance for a 10-mile run when I did 2 laps around the pit. For some reason, that place helped me cope, helped me forget what I had seen in the Middle East. The VA gave me pills. Running worked better. The old fencing was rusted through in places, and the no trespassing signs hadn't scared anyone off since the 90s. But nobody came out here. Not anymore. Certainly not this late. I ran my laps along the outer path, 3 miles around the rim. That night, I was on my 2nd lap. Shirt soaked, everything hurt. Then something changed my life forever. I saw something. Movement down in the pit. Something big, dragging something down the ramp. I slowed to a jog, then stopped altogether. Wiped my face. Blinked, just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. It was still there. It was real. Down at the edge of the basin, something massive, at least man-sized, maybe more, was pulling a dark shape through the dust. No lights, no vehicles, just moonlight and shadows and the crunch of weight over rock. I stepped closer to the edge, just enough to see the dragged shape better. It was some kind of animal, dead, body twisted, blood glistening like oil in the moonlight, fresh. The figure, hunched, awkward, silent, hauled it with one long, powerful arm, not like an animal, like a person handling a heavy load. It moved through the old excavation yard with purpose, approaching the junkyard of old machinery and storage containers in the middle of the pit. I felt my hand reach for the holster on my belt. I never left the house without my gun, not even when I went running. Old habits. War teaches you not to trust the quiet. Not ever. The hunched figure disappeared behind a line of old bulldozers. Toward an old shipping container, I realized. The one wedged between rusting diggers like it had been dropped and forgotten decades ago. And then that smell hit me, even though I was over 200 feet away. Faint at first, then stronger. Rot. Meat. Death. Like a butcher's shop that's been without power for a week. I should have walked away right then and there. Instead, I started making my way down the access path, boots careful on loose gravel, heart pounding with something I hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not yet. Curiosity, excitement even. The quarry always had a certain silence to it, but that night it was different, too still. The kind of quiet that made your instincts hum like a live wire. Every step down the winding ramp brought the stink closer, stronger. I held my breath as long as I could between paces, but it still wormed its way in, rancid, coppery, with a thick, wet layer of decay. I moved from boulder to boulder, keeping low, watching for any sign of motion near the shipping container. The only sound was the loose gravel crunching under my boots and the occasional ping of cooling metal from old equipment. No wind, no crickets, not even the frogs that usually clung to the waterline. I reached a spot behind an old cement mixer and crouched, trying to keep my breath even. That's when I saw it again. Just a glimpse through the gaps in the scrap metal piles. The container door was half open, and something moved inside. Slow, deliberate. Then came the sounds. Wet, tearing noises, bone cracking, flesh being ripped apart like old cloth, and low grunts, not animal, not human, somewhere in between. I eased closer, just enough to catch a clean angle through a jagged hole in the side of the container. It was in there, crouched over the dead animal's body, a calf by the looks of it. The thing was hunched, its back arched unnaturally, its body covered in thick, dark, matted fur. It was bigger than I thought, easily 5 feet tall, even while it hovered over the dead calf. It squatted like a gorilla, knees tucked, one hand supporting its body. It tore a chunk of meat from the calf's belly with its teeth, then used its hand to pull more into its mouth, not a paw. 5 long fingers, including a thumb, working in coordination. Clumsy, but functional and purposeful, like something that had once known how to eat like a person. The image of that thing stuffing meat into its mouth with its hand stayed with me. More than the blood, more than the smell, and then I really saw its face. What I was looking at was definitely not a person. The head was unmistakably wolf-like, but grotesquely malformed. Ears sharp and twitching, angled high on its skull like radar dishes. Its muzzle was long, but too wide for a wolf, with patches of flesh showing through uneven fur. When it bit down again, I saw the shape of massive canines, at least 3 inches long. This wasn't an ordinary animal. I was horrified, and I didn't know I was backing up until my heel struck a loose brick. I recognized my mistake right away. The thing inside the container froze, the chewing and heavy breathing stopping in an instant. Its head snapped up, and then, very slowly, it turned its impossibly ugly face toward me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Its eyes, now clearly reflecting the moonlight, locked onto mine. Not dumb, not wild, aware, and angry. It unfolded from its crouch with a series of sickening pops, bones shifting under too tight skin. 7 feet tall, maybe more, still hunched over, arms hanging loose. It slowly walked to the front of the container and stepped out into the open, sniffing the air, head tilted slightly like it was triangulating my fear. I unholstered my pistol, but my hands were shaking. Then it let out a sound, a low, guttural growl that started in its gut and climbed into something broken and hollow, almost a question or a warning. Then it stepped forward, slow at first, deliberate, testing my reaction. But with every step, the growl grew louder, deeper, more violent. My breath caught. My fingers twitched against the trigger. Then it picked up speed, shoulders hunching, claws scraping the dirt as it closed the distance. I panicked. I raised my pistol, aimed center mass, and fired. 3 shots. The muzzle flash lit up the creature like lightning. At least the first shot was a hit. I heard the bullet strike bone. The thing screamed. It was a horrible sound, part howl, part moan, part growl. For a second, it reeled back into the darkness, crashing into metal, roaring with pain. That's when I turned and ran. I spun on my heel and sprinted toward the nearest slope up the quarry wall, slipping in loose gravel, heart pounding in my throat. Behind me, I heard it give chase, claws scraping rock, limbs hammering against old machinery as it pursued. I made it halfway up before my foot slipped. I fell hard on my side, dirt in my mouth, gun slipping out of my hand. It was behind me, close. I didn't look. I just reached out, found the gun, thank God, and aimed it backward immediately, flipping on the flashlight as I did. The beam caught its face again, eyes blazing, fangs bared. It charged again. I fired. 2 more shots. Both hit. I heard the impacts, heavy and wet. The creature let out another scream, louder than before, angrier, but also in pain. It staggered, crashed down to ground, snarling and howling while frantically clawing at the gunshot wounds. That was my chance. I didn't wait to see if it got back up. I lunged for the top ledge, pulled myself over, and ran faster than I ever had before. At home, I was barely able to get the key in the lock. Finally inside, door locked and deadbolt set. I waited, chest heaving, hands clutching the gun tightly, praying that it hadn't followed me. It hadn't, thank the Lord. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, gun on the table, listening to every creak of the house and replaying every second of what I'd seen. The smell, the way it moved, the way it looked right at me, like it recognized me. The next day, I started searching. Not because I thought I'd find anything real, but because I had to do something. I typed in everything I could remember. Dogman in Wisconsin, quarry creature, human-wolf hybrid. Most of it was garbage. Reddit threads, cryptid blogs, people arguing over blurry photos. But one name kept coming up. The Beast of Bray Road. It was a local legend. Old sightings going back decades. Descriptions that made my skin crawl, because they matched. All of it. Hunched posture, hands instead of paws, feeding on livestock, reflective eyes, that same sick mix of wolf and man. I read for hours, barely blinking. Newspaper clippings, eyewitness accounts, some ridiculous, some not. I don't know what I saw that night, but I wasn't the only one. And what I had seen was real. Monsters exist after all, I guess. I haven't been back to the quarry since. Not even close. But some nights, when the wind comes from the west, I catch a smell through my kitchen window. Wet fur, copper, decay, and I know it's still out there.